Hello everyone, it's Pelicandude, and welcome to my first gameplay slash strategy analysis video, and this is for the PA Gamma. So as you just saw on your screen there, and if you've been paying attention, this is officially a game that has multi-planet starts. So I'm going to be walking through different strategies that I think we can use, and what I did specifically in this game. So basically, I think that the multi-planet start is changing the dynamic of the game, where we have single planet starts still too, if we want them, but multi-planet is going to be probably fairly common, I'd imagine, although there are certain things about it that are a little annoying right now. Later on, I feel like we're going to start seeing it be a lot more easy to have multi-planet games once we get things like the unit cannon in, for instance, that'll allow us to easily send invasion forces between the various planets that are in the game. So first off, I think that the most important thing that you're going to run into when you're playing a multi-planet game is trying to choose a planet that you're fairly hopeful, at least, that an enemy is not going to spawn on that planet. Because if an enemy does spawn on your planet, and one of your other enemies spawns on a planet and they're all by themselves, obviously they're going to have a huge economic advantage. So while you are busy fighting one of your opponents, another opponent, or if it's a free-for-all or a multi-team, more than two-team game, then what's going to happen is the one player or team is going to get a huge advantage just by being able to completely take over an entire planet and all of its resources, and not have to worry about spending resources on defenses and units to fight their enemy, while you're busy getting bogged down in a surface conflict with another player. So it's very important to try and either choose a planet that doesn't have enemy players on it, or you hope it's not going to have enemy players on it, or to quickly eliminate them once you do get on and spawn and start playing. So here's one thing I'd recommend is when you're looking at these planets and looking at all the places you have starting locations on, probably try and choose a smaller planet. Like, typically a smaller planet is going to have less probability that there's going to be another spawn location on it for an enemy to spawn. There probably is always going to be one enemy that might have the opportunity to spawn on a given planet, but a small planet's going to have less spawn locations on it, and therefore it'll be harder for you to spawn on the same planet as an enemy. I know that there were a couple planets in this particular match that I actually wasn't allowed to spawn on, that the spawn locations just didn't show up, and they were typically the smaller ones, so I'm guessing that that was just because the enemy was being allowed to spawn there, and if I had spawned there, it would have been, too close. So that's the first thing. Second of all, you want to choose a planet that's maybe not attractive. So this one, I got lucky because it was a 3 rocket or 3 Halley planet to move, which I felt like would be desirable, but it was the furthest one out, and I don't know if just the factor that it was the furthest one out and not in the middle caused it to be non-desirable to people, or if it was the fact that it's a moon, because that's something I noticed, is that 3 of the enemy players actually ended up spawning on one planet, and it was one of the Earth type planets or jungle type planets or whatever. And so I don't know if it's just that moons aren't attractive to certain people. I don't know, but just try and spawn on a moon or on a planet that doesn't have much going for it, so to speak, that you're hoping that other players won't spawn on. And even if it's not particularly resource rich, it's still going to be more overall economic for you to take control of an entire planet that's somewhat poor, instead of having to fight over one that maybe has more resources, but you're trying to compete with another player for control of them. So that's my advice for choosing your starting planet in a multi-planet gameplay. Now after that, you want to, obviously, after you spawn, make sure that you're the only one on this planet. So as you can see, what I've done here is I've basically taken radar and I've put it one really early on. I built in basically the center of my early base, and then later on I take a second one and I build it more or less on the other side of the planet, which basically gives me radar coverage of, well, almost the entire planet. And that allows me to see, okay, I'm alone on this planet. I don't have to worry about making attack units or defense units to protect myself. I just have to worry about expanding economically and starting to get weapons in place that'll allow me to attack the enemy players on the other planets. And that brings me to my next step, which is starting to pester enemies on the various planets. So obviously when you're, having a good time on your planet, you want to make sure that that same thing is not happening to the enemy players. You want to be giving them as much trouble as you possibly can. So I started making a orbital launcher pretty early on. I probably could have gotten an earlier start if I really wanted to, but I wanted my economy to be a bit more seated in before I started on that. But basically, I started making this orbital launcher, and then I quickly made some advanced orbital, well, I guess they're just orbital construction units. And what that allowed me to do is, one, I made an anchor just to defend myself in case somebody decided to show up in, some orbital fighters or something like that. And two, I went over to the other planet, or another planet, and I started to colonize it, which I was hoping that I would find an enemy on that particular planet. I ended up not finding enemies there, but that's okay, because it allowed me to spread out. And diversifying what planets you're on is definitely very advantageous, because it makes it where if I lose one planet, I don't get taken out of the game, more or less, and also I get to reap the benefits of having the additional resources of that second planet. In fact, if there's one thing in this game that I should have done better than what I ended up doing, is I didn't concentrate as much on the second planet that I colonized, and it ended up just not being that much of a resource, drive for me. I ended up using it later on, I ended up just doing nothing with it. Eventually, I didn't even use it for a planet tool or planet smashing tool. I actually used a completely different planet because my lack of interest in that planet meant that I didn't have very many units there because I wasn't paying attention to it, and that planet got taken from me. My main starting planet I kept for the whole game, thankfully, but my second planet that I reached out to and colonized was taken from me. But like I said, that didn't actually have an enemy started on it. It's just that an enemy came and took it away from me and invaded it, unbeknownst to me because I wasn't paying attention. But basically immediately after I started colonizing that planet, I went, oh great, well there's no enemies here, so I want to attack someone. I want to bother someone. I want to get someone out of this game. I want to start wearing down at the enemy players I'm facing. So what do? Like I said, I don't have any unit cannons, obviously, at this point in the game. No one has those. So my real options are teleportation gate to start, sending this almighty wave of units through, or interplanetary nuking. And interplanetary nuking works, but it's just not as fun. It's not as cool as the teleportation gate sending an army through. And while planet smashing is also pretty cool, I wanted to save planet smashing because it's expensive, and so I figured that if I just kept a planet in reserve that was ready to smash, if I could eliminate all but one of the enemy players, then I could just smash the planet into whoever was left. And that's actually what ends up happening. So what happens is I start spamming tanks, and I just start spamming ants at first. Later on, I get on to the more advanced units like shellers and what's the name of the advanced tank? The leveler, I believe? Yeah, it's because it's named after one of the units in TA. But anyway, shellers and levelers, some of the most wonderful units in this game, which there's not a giant unit variety, so I guess that makes sense. But those are both very effective units, and I ended up making this teleportation gate on an enemy planet. So one of the ways you can actually tell if the enemy is on a particular planet is orbital units. If you have orbital radar up, you can see units that are in orbit of other planets. So I ended up seeing that there's some satellites going on this planet, so I send over my orbital fabrication units, and I quickly just spam out a gate, as well as I, include these 3 anchors, or a couple of anchors at least. And that was only one anchor, I believe, to begin. I include this anchor to protect my orbital construction units while I'm busy making my orbital gate, or whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to call it a galactic gate because that's the best name, in my opinion. But after I do that, I start sending this army through. Now, Tech 1 was what I had at the time, so it worked, But as you can see, I managed to take out quite a few metal extractors, but not really hit any of their core base stuff. So one of the really things that's important that you have to do is send construction units after him. So I spam out this defense base. First defense base gets overrun. I have the construction units fall back, and I managed to make a second defense base, and that actually managed to hold out. And I start making another gate. I managed to send more units through, and eventually, because of the mass amount of Tech 2 units that are starting to come through at this point, because of how late in the game it's gotten, and I've gotten several advanced vehicle plants, I managed to overrun this guy and basically annihilate his base on this planet, which I believe was his starting planet, although his commander did manage to escape for now. But I effectively took him out of the game, more or less, or at least gave him a pretty significant setback, and that is always a good thing to do to your enemy. So in addition to that, I wanted to be prepared because I knew orbital nukes were probably going to start coming in. So I made these anti-nukes to make sure that the orbital nukes that would attack wouldn't get very far, and then also started increasing my economy. So you always want to be increasing your economy. Make sure you have advanced metal extractors on pretty much every metal deposit on your starting planet, and then also work on getting huge lines of advanced energy generators. That'll help you a ton late game because it'll just allow you to spam anything you want, more or less, if you get that giant economy going. And then start making nukes as well, because those are good for taking out key enemy installations if you see them. And even though I said orbital nukes are lame, or interplanetary nukes are kind of lame, and they're not, well, I shouldn't say they're lame, but they're just not as fun of a way of winning as the other methods that are available to us. Right now, they're legitimate. They're not bad, and sometimes you're just going to have to go with that interplanetary nuke in order to win the game. So eventually, though, it's just me and one other player. The two other players get taken out by another person, and this third player gets also killed by another person. And what happens is it's just me and the one enemy. And this also happens to be the one enemy that I gave major setbacks to in the game by taking out his base on his starting planet. So he's set back a lot. I still have control of my entire starting planet, have tons of resources, and I have a firm foothold on his starting planet now from the fact that I've took it over and have, now dozens and dozens of Tech 2 tanks there. And I end up building boosters on my on the planet that I took over from him. That's not the first thing I tried, though. So first of all, I got recon on him by sending orbital satellites, or radar satellites. Orbital satellites, yeah, no kidding. I sent orbital radar to all the various planets to try and figure out which planet he was hiding on. And then I started making an orbital laser platform. I think I finished it, but I just never used it. And then also I started teleporting units to his location on the main center planet. And that took out a sizable swath of his base, but eventually just kind of the advanced aircraft overwhelmed them. And so I ended up planet smashing into him, which, like I said, it's always a good idea to try and keep a planet, so to speak, in your back pocket, so that way you can quickly smash someone if you see they're up to no good on their planet and you just have to take it out. You can just smash it into them. And honestly, with the new interplanetary start locate, feature, you can even do it to your starting planet if you want. And doing it to your starting planet, where you build boosters on it, can just be a last-ditch effort to kill someone, and it can also be a way of defending yourself by just, changing orbits, for instance. Change the orbit of your starting planet is something that might be advantageous to you if you want to kind of bail out and go to the far reaches of the solar system. So as you can see, I do end up winning with the planet smash, which is really fun and really cool always. And it's just kind of the classic planetary annihilation way of doing things, because that was more or less what the game was made for. And that is basically the game. So I hope you enjoyed it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this analysis and the kind of strategy guide, tips and tricks type thing. If you liked it, please like it. I am planning on doing a live commentary for Planetary Annihilation later on. I already said, I'm not very good at doing live comms, but I figure I'll do one a week maybe, just to keep things going, somewhat interestingly, and then I'll also try and keep doing one unit guide video a week. So I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and with that, I hope you have a nice day.